Good evening. I'm Sandy Collins. I'm an Artist Services Manager at the Australia Council for the Arts, and we are going to give a presentation on our funding for arts projects and individuals. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather this evening, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects on behalf of the Council to Elders past and present. Hi, hope you're all doing well. I'd like to introduce you to my colleagues. We have Amelia.
Hi.
We have Guy, and we have Dane up there in Brisbane.
Or Meanjin, the land of the terrible people.
Thank you, Dane. And thanks to Yasmin Masri from City of Ryde for inviting us to talk to you. This session is being recorded, so if anyone is uncomfortable with that, then best bail out now. We have a chat function, and we also have a Q&A function, which is what we'd like you to use for any questions that you have. We'll try to answer them in good time, but we've also got some time at the end of the session that we can, we're devoted to a Q&A, basically. We're going to keep it pretty simple. Basically, the Australia Council for the Arts is the federal government's chief funding and advocacy for the arts body. We're part of the Artist Services team in the Arts Investment Division, and we're just going to talk about what we do, not what other sections of council do, because you're not interested in that. You're only interested in how to register and apply for a grant. We operate on a assessment process, a peer assessment process for all the applications. So it's arm's length from government, which is different to how the state and territory arts funding instruments work, where they have a minister involved in the decisions. We have peers that make the recommendations, and then the Australia Council apply the appropriate funding. We have an upcoming closing date on Tuesday, the 2nd of March, and that is for arts projects for individuals and groups, arts projects for organisations, for those of you that might be interested in that, and the contemporary music touring program, which is basically for bands and music groups that want to tour to regional and remote Australia. And the last one is the Playing Australia round, which is the performing arts, which also includes music, but the performing arts regional and remote touring program. We have, as I mentioned before, our assessment panels, and I can never remember them all, so I'm going to have to read them out to you. We have Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Arts Panel, the Community Arts and Cultural Development Panel, Dance Panel, which is all dance, Emerging and Experimental Arts, Literature, Multi-Art Form, Music, Theatre and Visual Arts. And as we always say, that if you're unsure about what panel you want your application to be assessed by, you get in contact with us. We're going to put some contact details in the chat, and yeah, give us a call, as Dane is so cleverly miming and I'm so cleverly understanding. So what we'd like to do is just chat through arts projects for individuals and groups, including, as I say, the next closing date is the 2nd of March, Tuesday, the 2nd of March, and we cut off at 3 p.m. daylight AEDT.
Sydney time.
Sydney time.
Sydney time, yes, Sydney time, hammer time, because we're based in Sydney. We're going to go through our application management system, which is called Flux, F-L-U-X-X. We're going to talk about the 3 criteria that you must address in your application, and then we'll go on to the Q&A. I'd also like to say thank you to the lovely Shavoy and Sean, who will be joining us later. They are our fabulous Auslan interpreters, and we thank them so much for their wonderful work. Yeah, that's a round of applause. We don't have the shakes. Well, we might, but not for now. As I say, you can ask questions on the Q&A with the Q&A function. But I think what we'll do is, we'll start off with the application management
Let's do it. I'm going to share my screen.
Because she's so clever.
Oh, the host disabled participant screen sharing, but I'm not a participant.
Oh, okay. So
there we go.
There we go.
He moves quick.
Oh, he does. Thanks,
Okay.
Diego. We also have the fabulous Diego, who is our wingman.
Okay.
Wing person.
So this is the Australia Council for the Arts website. And the easiest place to go is to the grants section, which is up the top left-hand corner, and there'll be a drop-down menu. And generally speaking, you'd start at our grant programs, and then you can click there, and it shows you a list of all of the grants that are available at the Australia Council. The ones that we are talking about this evening are arts projects for individuals and groups. So if you click on that, it brings up a little bit of information about the project or about the grant, and then read more, and it gives you more in-depth information. So the best thing to do, well, what you need to do initially is to apply now. So you need to register in the system first. So if you click on apply now, it'll bring you to this page. And because I'm already registered, my login details are there. But if this was your first time, on the right-hand column down the bottom, there is a button for create an account. You would click on that, and then it will bring up, this is just collection of personal information. And then, do you want to register as an individual? So that is if you were doing a project on your own or as part of a group that is not a business or an organization. So you would click yes. And then this is where you put in your personal information. Are you an Australian citizen or resident? Most of our, not all, but most of our grants are only open to Australian citizens.
All permanent residents.
All permanent residents,
Yeah.
but not 100% of our grants. There are some that are open to overseas people. But you can also be an Australian citizen or resident that lives overseas. You can choose to be linked to an organisation. Say you were applying on behalf of FBI Radio, for example, that's already in the system, and you want to be connected to them, you can put that in. And then this is all of your standard personal information, first name, last name, do you go by a different name, street address, postcode, standard contact information. Then there's a part about the Australian business number or your ABN. You don't have to have an ABN at the time of registering, so you can click no if you don't have one. But if you were successful in getting a grant, you would need an ABN or have someone administer the grant for you. But we can go into that later. Date of birth, which arts practice are you mainly associated with? That's a drop down, and you can choose which one. And then once you put in all of those details, you can put submit request, and then it's around 2 working days for people such as myself who go in and accept and process your registration. And then once your registration has been processed, I should also mention that this closes 2 days before a closing date. So you'd want, because it takes around 2 days to process your application.
And I just jump in that, for the 7 years I've been at the Australia Council, the majority of people submit their applications on the day that it closes, and it causes everybody a lot of grief. So I'd just like to,
Get in early.
And even if you start an application in draft, you can always come back to it later, and also save your work offline as well in case there's a glitch on the day and you lose your internet or whatever and you can't submit.
So yeah, you want to do that at least 2 days before the closing date. And then once you've done all that, and you'll get an automatic email sent to you once you've been accepted into the system that will give you your username, and then you can set a password for your account. So once you've done that, you can sign in, and it will bring you to the online portal. And down on the left-hand column, there is a grey column. And this will be everywhere where you can update any of your contact information. Say you change your email address or your phone number changes, you can update all of that information in here. This is also where you apply for the grant. So you'll see here, apply for a grant is the second one down.
Yep.
You'll click on that, and then that brings up all of the grants that are currently open that you are eligible to start applying for. So for the purpose of this, we go into arts projects for individuals and groups, and then start a new application. And then that will load. And then you have to start putting in your information. Again, it asks you if you're an Australian citizen or permanent resident, and then it will ask for your name. You don't need to put it in 20,000 times. I don't know why it's done that.
Yeah.
Little glitch. And the contact information will automatically populate from your profile. And then underneath that, there's a box for, are you applying on behalf of a group? So that a group is different to a business or an organization. A group could be a group of artists coming together to work on a project, or in a lot of bands are considered groups. So they might have a partnership ABN. So that's where you would say, yes, I'm applying on behalf of a group. So it could be you're the main contact for the band, or you're the main contact for the group of artists. And then underneath that is a section on administered grants. And that is if you are going to nominate someone to take the, if you're going to nominate someone to look after the grant money for you, if you are successful in accepting the grant. That's known as an administered grant, or it could be known as a fiscal sponsor. It does have a few different names, but if you're confused about that, you could just contact the Artist Services team, and we can go into that in a bit more detail. And then there's just some things that you need to acknowledge: protocols for working with Indigenous artists and communities. Commonwealth Child Safe Framework is another option. And then if we scroll down, then we start to get into the nitty-gritty of the actual application itself. So this is where you can choose which arts practice panel you want to be assessing your application. You can only choose one, and it's best for you to choose, as Sandy mentioned, the one that would understand your application the best. And if you do have more in-depth questions about that, it's highly advised that you call the Artist Services team, and we can sort of point you in the right direction. And then there's a section on if you're planning on submitting your application in a language other than English, which you are able to do.
We just like a little bit of notice on those as well. We will accept applications in languages other than English, including an Auslan interpretation. We have and any help that we can give We do with access, but again, we need time so that we can find the right people to assist in getting your application translated or submitted in however is, you know, an accessible format for you.
And then this is the real meaty part of the application. So project title is what you want to call the project. That can be a working title. A project summary, so that's self-explanatory, a summary about the project that you're applying for funding for. The About You section is where you are outlining who you are and your artistic practice, and you would assume that the panelists don't know who you are. So you want to be, you know, leaving nothing up to guesswork, putting in as much information as possible about who you are, your practice, your career highlights, your achievements, and all of that we'll touch on later when we come to the quality criterion. And then there's a part for if you're working with other artists or creatives, so that could be other collaborators on the project, and that's where you can put in information about them. And then the next section is about the project itself that you're asking for funding for. So this is the big juicy part. So this is where you want to be talking about the creative rationale. You want to be talking about the steps that you're going to undertake to deliver the project. Basically everything to do with the project basically goes into this section. And then there's a part about organisations that you might be working with. So they might be, say you're partnering with a big festival to present your work, or whatever it might be, a venue, a publicity
another theatre company, yeah, gallery, museum.
All of that goes in there. And then activity details. So this is the timeline of events basically on how you're going to put together your project. So if you were, you know, if your project was writing a book, it might just be that you have from December to March, I'll be dedicating this time to writing my book. Or
can I just jump in as well? For the March closing date, it'll be for projects that March, April, May, June, after the 2nd of June, I think.
Yeah, first
June. Yes.
So yeah, when you're putting in an application for this one, your project can't start until after the 1st of June.
Yeah.
And then you have 2 years to complete the project. Yeah. So your project, you might foresee it only going for a few months, or you might foresee it going for the full 24 months. That's up to you and what your project is. But yeah, that's basically where you are outlining the activities that are going to take place that will be funded, essentially.
We also have a lot in these, I'll just jump in again, COVID-19, obviously the pandemic has, you know, pretty much ruined a lot of people's projects. So people that have gotten funding and then their projects have had to change significantly. Again, they get in contact with us and we try and help them through to repurpose the funding or to extend out the timeline. Again.
Yeah, so if things do change within, like if you are successful and you receive funding and things change within your project, you can submit what's called a variation request. So you're asking for a slight, or in some cases, a major change to what's being funded. And then we have to go through and either approve that or ask for more details and work with you on that. So it's not set in stone what you are getting funded for. You can have variations to it, especially, as Sandy said, in the age of COVID. And now we get into the part about the assessment criteria. So there's 3 assessment criteria. I might pass to Dane to talk about the first one, which is quality.
Thanks, Amelia. So when you're thinking about the application, the assessment criteria is the most important thing to keep in mind. And the first one that you'll encounter is quality. The first way to think about it is, what is the quality in your idea? What do you want to do? And why is it a great idea for you and helping you to the next stage in your career? Why is it a great idea for your audience or the people who might buy or attend your work? If you can start off on a strong foot by introducing the story of your brilliant idea, then you'll stand your application in good stead. Quality is also in reference to the support material that you provide. So show us the best stuff that you've made or done before. You can do this through videos, photos, audio recording, or in text samples. Excuse me. The assessors are experts in their art form, and their perception of your work strongly influences how they think about your application. The assessors will also consider the quality of your co-creatives. Are you working with great people? Or a great gallery or a theatre company? What's your track record and their track record? Also, lastly, you can demonstrate the quality of your application with the support letters that you provide. A few key letters from people of calibre who are enthusiastic and knowledgeable about your work will provide more confidence that you'll be able to make something wonderful with this investment.
Dana, also just the peers want to hear the voice of the artist or of you. Talking about your project in the third person drives people nuts. Also, the non-use of paragraphs to just jam more characters in, that's a no-no. You need to tell your story about who you are and what you want to do and why you need the funding. As Dane said, you put your best foot forward and phone a friend. Talk to a friend about whether your voice is coming through in the application.
Have people read your application.
Have people read it so it doesn't sound all stilted and like, oh, dear Australia Council gods, please. And because as Dane said, these people are your peers and they know their stuff.
So
you're going to talk about viability.
So it needs to be a great idea in order for an application to be competitive, but it's not just enough that it needs to be a great idea, it also needs to be achievable, and that's what the viability assessment criterion is about. And what we mean in talking about the viability of a project is, do you have the skills necessary to be able to undertake it successfully? Have you allowed enough sort of lead time to deliver it? So is it achievable in terms of the time that you've allocated? Is the budget strong enough to deliver on absolutely everything that you've undertaken to? So the viability assessment criterion is assessed by looking at a few bits of information. It's assessed by looking at, number one, the budget and the timeline. So it's really important to pay the artists that are involved in the project adequately and to show that everyone is being treated as they should be and paid appropriately. The viability assessment criterion also talks about the role of collaborators and the level of confirmation that you're able to show. So it's not required that absolutely every activity and every partner that you identify in the application is confirmed at the time that you apply, but it's definitely advantageous to where you can to show that people are going to be working with you and confirm that where possible. The diversity and scale of income and co-funding is also another way that the viability assessment criterion is looked at. So what that means is, do you have any other grants that are contributing towards the project? Is someone contributing in-kind contributions? And by in-kind, we mean a good, a service, a product that is contributed to your project free of charge or at a discounted rate, but ordinarily you'd have to pay. So an example of that might be a venue is giving you access to rehearsal space free of charge when normally you'd have to pay for it. That's an in-kind contribution, and you should show that in the budget where you can, and that's assessed as part of the viability criterion. Another really important part of viability is adherence to relevant cultural protocols. So in particular, that means if you're working with Indigenous communities, Indigenous artists, it needs to be really clear that you're adhering to the protocols for doing that. And there's loads of information on the website about the way that you might approach that. It also means that if you're working with any particular community, like young children or any other community, that you're doing that in an appropriate way, that's a part of the viability criterion. But basically, overall, what the viability, it's basically about how achievable the project is overall, and that it's going to be undertaken in a timely, appropriate way. one last thing that I add on that is that the viability is also looked at by looking at the timeliness of a proposal and what that can mean. It can mean a couple of things. It can mean that it's timely in the sense that it's time to coincide with a major event. So for example, it's an event that can only happen now. It can't happen in 2 years' time. It needs to happen in the next 6 months. So it can be, that's a dimension in which it can be timely. It can also be timely in the sense of your own development as an artist. So you need to do this right now to make the most of your career progression, for example. So there's also a third assessment criterion that I'll pass to.
There is. So the third assessment criterion is the one that you actually need to address how your project links to the third criterion.
And that is linked, sorry, because I just want to say it's linked to our corporate plan, the Australia Council for the Arts corporate plan, and there's also a link provided on the website as well, which will give you all kinds of information. But the top line information, I'm going back to Amelia.
So you can only select one, but there are 4 options that you can choose from for the third criterion. So the first one is Australians are transformed by arts and creativity. So that one relates to audiences and participation and that sort of thing. The second one is our arts reflect us. So this criterion is about diversity, access, and equity. The third one is First Nations arts and culture are cherished. And the fourth one is arts and creativity are thriving, which is about the creation and distribution and reach of new work. So we won't go into too much detail about each of those criterions because they are explained quite in depth on our website on the part about the arts projects for individuals and groups. If you scroll down, you'll see the criteria and how it will be assessed, and you can look at the third criterion and all the information that you need is there, but stressing that this is the one that you actually need to say, tell us how your project meets the outcome you've selected above. So you would select one of those and then explain how your project relates to that.
Yeah. And this is one of the first times that an application form directly relates to our corporate plan, because we obviously as a federal government agency have to report back to government very, very regularly. Obviously, there's we have a very stringent audit processes applied to our grants, and the way they're reported on, the way the peers assess, and while we're on that topic, a topic of my own choosing, it's very we have a very it's incredibly competitive. That's not to say don't apply. It's just you really need to manage expectations. We're running at about a 15% success rate, which is on the number of applicants. It's a kind of a bit of a fuzzy science because it's kind of on the money on the requests, and it's also the number of applications across all those arts practices that I mentioned before. Now, 15% is not very many. We get around usually around 1,200 odd applications every round. We've just gone from, I quite like the lights out, actually, I've got to say, the lights just went out, sorry. We've gone from 3 rounds a year to only 2 now in 2021, and for a variety of different reasons that I'm not going to go into now, but so it is incredibly competitive. Yeah, Guy wants to say.
Yeah, the one thing that I'd say is even though the success rate is usually somewhere between 15 and 20% at the most, if you don't apply, the chance of success is 0%. So you shouldn't, you should approach the process being aware of what the success rate is, but also you shouldn't be absolutely just waiting from applying at all because of that.
We have we do have a high rate of first-time applicants that are successful though. So don't be put off by that stat. And I think Yasmin gave us some figures saying that some of the people that have registered for this session had applied to the Australia Council and were successful. So, and against all odds, because it was 7 people that registered, had applied for Australia Council funding, and 3 were funded. So, you know, go you if you're out there. Well done. We applaud you. Do you want to go back to the form, Amelia?
To this form?
Yes.
Yes.
Just to go.
And then the next, after you've addressed the criterion of your choosing, then that's when you have the opportunity to put in the budget. So this is where you put in your income. So any income generated from the project that you are seeking funding for. And then in-kind income is
what Guy was talking about.
Guy was talking about before, which is things that add value to your project that you're not necessarily paying for. In-kind is often quite a good thing to show support for your project. So it even could be, you know, you're staying at someone's house instead of paying for accommodation, or you are, again, rehearsal space for free, or a festival is providing you with marketing and promotions for your project that you don't have to pay for, that you normally would pay for.
Something I'd say that it's not expected, it's not required that there be another source of income for it's not expected or required that there be another source of income for a project. If the Australia, it's basically, if ours is the only grant that you're expecting to get, that's okay. But if there is diversity of support, if there is any kind income that you can show, it's absolutely in your interest to show that where you can.
Yeah, and generally speaking, you probably would be able to find some things that are in kind that you didn't think were necessarily worth putting in, but and then of course there's the expenses. So that is you know, the expenses in your project, and then the total amount of funding that you ask for is your income minus your expenses, or expenses minus your income. So it automatically populates into the form, so you can't write in exactly what you are asking for. It automatically populates.
We don't fund infrastructure. So, you know, you can't, but materials, yes, definitely. And rent of gallery or studio or venue, whatever. But we don't, you can't go build a mud hut to make it work in. We don't do that.
Something that I'd add about the budget is this is a part of the application form that assessors have never complained about there being an excess of detail in. So it's really in your interests to enter as much information in the budget as you're able to break down large items into smaller items if you can. And there's also a spot where you can show how you have worked out the figure that you're including. So say if you are paying someone an artist fee of $3,000, it's good to show that
how you arrived at that.
How you've arrived at that and you calculated it.
Yeah.
Just to show them that it's not worked out on the back of an envelope, that you've actually invested some real time into it.
Yeah, put as much information as you can in the budget.
We also have a resources page on our website, which lists a whole stack of organisations that you represent, like the MEAA, which is for you know, the Performing Arts or Live Arts Australia, NAVA, which is the Visual Arts Association, which they have published rates for all kinds of artists and arts professionals that you can use, and there's also lists of things like per diem or living away from home allowances. They're very easy to find, and they also obviously go into your expenses as well. Sorry, I just wanted to.
And assessors find it really great if you are paying artists as well. So make sure you're paying yourself, you're paying the people that are involved in the project. That is always looked upon really favourably.
Yes, the Australia Council's funding is for artists and arts professionals, and you must have arts at the centre of the project, and you must be paying the artist,
The
which is
appropriate
you,
rate.
at the appropriate rate.
It's very often that especially in music, there are a lot of art forms in which an applicant is likely to undercut the pay that they are giving themselves, or to discount the rate of pay to other people, thinking that it's going to make the application more competitive. In fact, it's the opposite. If you're not paying appropriately, it causes the assessors to doubt the viability of the project because people aren't being adequately remunerated for their work.
We also have a very strong work health safety ethic and well-being in the workplace, safe workplaces. So just touching on what Guy said, if you're going going on tour and it's like, oh no, we're not going to fly, we're going to drive out of Reggio, bongo van for 24 hours straight through the desert, and we're going to sleep in the back of it to get there to save all this money. No, that will be seen as an unviable project, and it'll be scored down.
And then underneath the budget section is the budget summary, so that's where it comes up with your Australia Council grant request. And then the next section is on statistical information about yourself and the application, which is not used in the assessment process, but it's important information to include nonetheless.
Again, this is all to do with our reporting back to government. It's your name or it is not associated with this. It's so that we can, we have lots of diversity and inclusion, and our cultural engagement framework is very strict and strong. So we're just trying to find out who we're engaging with, basically.
But yes, again, it doesn't go to your assessment in any way.
No.
And then there is the section down the bottom is about your support material. So this is where you can include anything that's going to bolster your application. So it could be your bio, your letters of support, it can be proof of previous work that you've done, so that's artistic support material, so links, photographs, YouTube videos of your music, whatever it happens to be that's going to prove the quality of your work, basically. And that's where you, and it's listed here, all the formats that you can upload them in. It's good if they're not necessarily password protected, but if they are, there is a spot where you can put a password.
But also please note that if a peer assessor has to sign in to see your web page or whatever, they won't.
Yeah, just make it as easy as
because
possible.
They're anonymous until the successful and unsuccessful grants applicants are notified, and then there's a full embargo, which is like a couple of weeks after that, and until that's lifted, then the successful applicants are published on our website, as are the peer assessors by each panel.
Yeah, so basically just make it as easy as possible for the peer assessors to do their job, because they also have to go through hundreds of applications.
Dane, I'm going to just drag you in here, because Dane was an assessor for the Australia Council before he came over to the dark side to be in the Artist Services team, and he's also worked at another arts organisation for Arts Tasmania, and he's an all-round legend. But if you can just give us your peer experience, Dane.
Sure. Sorry, I've just had my head in the chats.
Yes, I know. Thank you.
That's all right. So do you want me to explain the peer experience for the people here today, like how their work will be assessed? Is that?
Yeah. How an assessor goes about.
How an assessor approaches it. Good, thank you. Usually peers will be assigned a number of applications. It can be up to 130. Some rounds are like that, very big. It can be as few as about 40, but it's usually about 100. And they've got several months to go through all of the applications, do all the reading, listening, viewing of all the support material. And during that process, they're asked to score each application from 1 to 7 based on how well that application answers the quality, viability, and optional third criterion. So the people will do that, on their own at home using their computers. And then we come together, the peers all come together. We're working out various ways to do that at the moment. It used to be a couple of days meeting at the office. Due to COVID, we've been doing much more online through Zoom and Teams chats or Teams videos. It's kind of, we're still evolving that, based on the situation of the world at the moment. But what happens then is the assessors have the opportunity to then discuss the applications, particularly the ones that are in the top band, to talk about why they think a particular one is great, or where they've spotted something that deserves extra attention that other people might not have picked up on, and particularly where every assessor's different. They are all experts in their field, but within each field, there's so much knowledge to have. Not everyone knows everything. So, and that's the quality of the conversation that happens at the table. And through that process, they're able to then formulate a list of which ones have scored the highest and down towards a cutoff point. They never quite know where that is, but the Australia Council is able to fund down to, as Guy mentioned, around that 15 to 17% mark. And so the assessors are very carefully pay attention to the top 25% to make sure they're in the right order.
Beautiful. And in the panels, so this round in March, they'll be forming a whole stack of the panels populated by 5 to 7 peers. So that's quite a lot of people that they've got to wrangle. And now, usually we used to have the meetings here in Sydney in our boardrooms here, but due to COVID-19 restrictions and border closures, et cetera, they're primarily being done via Teams, and only about a day or a day and a half to assess, however many come into each panel. Going forward, we're going to try to have a hybrid model where we've got some people in the Australia Council that can that can come in safely, and then some will be on screen. But we're just we'll have to sort of wait and see. Hopefully things open up even more, and by the time these meetings are held for the March round, which will be in April, mid-April, we might be able to see some more of our fabulous peers. Yeah, sure, okay. You can only, I just want to just say that you can only submit one application to this to this closing date. That's,
so if you have
that's the
2
rule.
projects,
So if you have,
you can apply for your strongest one.
Pick your best one, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're right on, what are we, 6:45, so let's, we're happy to take your some questions. And I know I think we've answered the ones that are in there in the chat. So if we can,
you could post them in the Q&A section.
Yeah.
If you have any questions. So instead of the chat, there's a little dialogue for Q&A.
While those are arriving, I might just add a quick word about support material,
Yes.
which is at the end of the application form. It's really in your interest to show support material that is directly related to the project that you're proposing. So the support material should show what you're capable of, but also what you're proposing to do in the proposal that you're putting forward. So in answer to Alfonso's question, we can see a number of case studies online on the Australia Council's website of individual works that have been supported in the past.
I can probably show you where on the website.
There's also a complete list of projects that have been supported in the past. There's not a lot of information that it doesn't list. It's basically there's a spreadsheet of every grant that's been supported in the past. It's for 6 years or so that it's available on the website and the amount, but there's a limited number of detailed case studies as well that you can look at.
So yeah, just on the grants page on the Australia Council website, down the bottom, you will see on the left-hand column, awarded grants.
Yeah.
You can click on that and then it will give you it's quite hidden there, but download a list. You'll see there is a little link there. And if you click on that, you can see who's been awarded in the past.
You can show it if you like.
Downloads as a
hideous Excel.
Excel document, and then you can look through and do some research on who they are and what they've done and that sort of thing.
We also have case studies and on our website as well, but there's a question there about where can we see samples of successful grants. We wouldn't show anybody an actual application that was successful because it's privacy basically, and we but you, as you know,
the case studies are a good place
the case
to start.
studies are a really good place to start. Also the awarded grants, you can sort that Excel by arts practice. So if you're a visual artist, you just sort it by download it and sort it by visual arts, and then
do your own research
on who's got the who were awarded the grants.
You can also see in that awarded grants who peers have been, so the people that are assessing the grants, so you can just get a sense for who. It's not guaranteed that they'd be doing the next round, but it just gives you a sense of the sorts of people that are looking at your application.
Okay, so we've got a question from Shane O'Neill. I'm going to read it out so that our interpreter can Auslan interpret. So this is from Shane. So if I say send in the first chapter of the piece I'm working on, being a memoir, however, the grant is for a children's picture book and the illustrator already has a published children's picture book, does that sound acceptable for quality? Also, the memoir and children's book are placed for the most part in the same country.
So yeah, there's a couple of issues there. So it's if you're submitting basically if you're applying for a grant to support a picture book and you're working with an illustrator, it's important to show examples of the illustrator's work if you can, as well as your own work. I'm not completely clear on which you'd be applying for, but if you're submitting support material, it's really in your interest to show examples of your work in the genre that you're proposing the new work to be in. So if you're applying for a memoir, you should be showing samples of your writing that's in a similar genre, if not the genre that you're applying for. So keep the selection of support material as targeted as you possibly can and keep it as succinct. So every time assessors are looking at an application, they need to see support material that is there for a reason, needs to be targeted and related to what you're proposing.
Yeah, so you'd apply to the literature panel, Shane, but yeah, we don't ask for in some of the other scholarships and grants like Dal Stevens, I think. Anyway, well, I won't confuse you with that. You're best to stick with what you want the money for. So if you're working with you're looking for a grant to work with on a children's book, then that's what you're asking for. You don't need to submit a piece of writing from a memoir unless you want to submit a link to something that you've already published, that's been published.
Mm-hmm.
So there's another question that's just arrived now, and it's about, do you have to have an arts degree in order to be eligible for the grants that we have? Or basically, in answer to that, it's not expected or required that you have a professional degree or you have a qualification in the arts in order to be eligible. What the assessors are looking at is track records. So that doesn't necessarily mean you went to art school or went to a conservatorium or had any particular sort of background. What they're looking for is if you have the background in order to successfully undertake the project that you're proposing. That doesn't mean you have to have a qualification. So it's basically open to anyone it's open to anyone who identifies as a practicing artist in Australia, and that can be at the emerging stage, the mid-career stage, or the established stage.
I've got a question.
Yes.
Oh, hi everyone, I'm here again. I've done a couple of these similar presentations before, and sometimes I find it's useful to turn the question around and say why you won't get a grant from us. And I think we've touched on a few of these before, but it's good to just reiterate. So I might say a couple, and if the other staff members can think of a couple while I'm talking through mine. These are just things that you can, if you get it right, then you protect yourself from having an application that isn't successful. So my first one is providing broken links in your support material. I most often look after music, and I would say at least 10% of them give us links that don't go anywhere. And if we can't listen to your music, we can't assess it. It should be easy to fix. So some of the most common ones as well is if you're giving a Dropbox link, make sure the files stay in that Dropbox and you don't move them around, or you don't fill up your Dropbox so much that people can't access the file. My second one is getting the in-kind section of the budget wrong. Guys already talked about this well, but think about it in the sense of in-kind is something that's contributed to your project but is not cash. Something that has value that is not cash. And I'll give one third one. And it's something that sometimes people do. They make their application in academic speak. We don't need footnotes. We don't need references. What we want to hear, as Sandy mentioned before, is your voice. How about you guys?
There's another question that's arrived from Shane, and it's about how do you actually, basically he's asking, is there a way to, is there a way of showing that you're actually a practicing artist? The way that you do that is in the introduction. So in the About You section, you describe what you do, how you work, who you've worked with, what you've accomplished in the past. We're not going to look at a degree in PDF form. It's the way you introduce yourself. So the way to substantiate the fact that you're a practicing artist is, imagine if you meet someone for the first time, at a party, describe what you do and the way that you're an artist in that sort of way, because that's the way that it's basically the way you introduce yourself to others is the way that you should introduce yourself to assessors.
But then you'd also back that up with your support material. So putting your previous works, links to other albums that you've released if you're applying to music, for example. I'm
going to answer Ruth's, even though, have you put it in? There you go. Good on you, Ruth. This question is, if the project is open to the public, would we need to write out the details of how we will stay COVID safe? If so, which section should we put it in? And with regulations changing all the time, how do we cater to that? Well, it depends on what the project is, but you would have in about the project.
Yeah.
You would put in, this is what I'm doing, and we are adhering to COVID safe practice in terms of distancing or providing PPE to the bar staff, whatever restrictions are at the time of you applying, then that's what you have to adhere to. So you put it in about the project in that section. And also, yeah, we get it that regulations are changing all the time. There's not a lot we can do about that.
You could put in contingency plans. So
you can certainly put in contingency plans.
Are relatively open at the moment, especially in Victoria. So you might have, your event might adhere to the current restrictions, but you could also put in there this is scalable based on the changes that may come into effect with restrictions. And then if you were successful in getting a grant, and restrictions change significantly and you need to, rearrange your budget to allow for PPE, for example, then you can put in a variation request for those sorts of things.
And you can also put it in your budget as well.
Yeah, as an access cost. You list it as an access cost. Yeah,
that's right. Exactly. We've only got 3 more minutes.
Can we do one more question?
So we can do one more question.
If there is any.
And I just want to, have we put up the contact details again on the?
I'll do that.
Thank you, Guy, because he said he would. And I think we're going to put that in the chat line, yeah. And we'll stay in contact with Yasmin, obviously. But if there's no more questions, I'd just like to say thank you to my fabulous colleagues.
Thank you.
Dane, Guy, Amelia. I want to thank Yasmin for reaching out. She rang us on the telephone and she's got it all together. And I'd really like to say thank you to Shavoy and Sean for their fabulous Auslan interpretation. The session's also going to be captioned. And again, we will put it all on our website and send the link through to Yasmin for distribution. So we might send you out a little, were we okay? What could we do better? You don't have to answer it, but it's really good for us because we're constantly wanting to improve these sessions. And now at the moment, because we can't be in front of you, which is usually what we do. We travel all over the countryside, speaking to artists and arts professionals. And because it's all online, we just want to keep improving and giving you the best information that we possibly can. And just want to thank you all very much for registering and showing some interest and getting involved. And we're very grateful. So thank you very much, everybody. And I think we'll say good evening and have a nice
Thanks, Sandy. Thank you, Sandy. Yeah. Give us a call. Call us.
night.